welcome to the DJ NTV Virtual Expo 2020. My name is Sean Carlson. I am from Carlson Entertainment, and tonight I am going to let you get inside this DJ's camera bag. So, if you don't know anything about me, I run a little DJ and video production company called Carlson Entertainment up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin here, and something that we really like doing is working together with our clients to create content for during their events for transitions. We also create content during their events that we can record and play back later so that they can rewatch their events. We have feature films, and we also create a lot of content for ourselves. So what I'm going to do tonight is take a look at some of the tools that we use to create films and show you some different cameras, some different audio equipment, and some different items that you may like to use if you're thinking about getting started, either creating content for your brand, creating transitional type videos for your clients, or even just starting maybe a video production division of your company and you're looking to get in the door. All of these items I'm going to show you are definitely on the more affordable side, so I'm not going to dig in super deep into fancy equipment with a lot of bells and whistles that maybe you don't need as a DJ. These are going to be good cameras that I like to use as a DJ that are affordable and really put out a good product. So first, if you really don't have a ton of money and you're looking to get started in this, there's nothing wrong with just using your cell phone. I have an iPhone 10 and I love using it. There's certainly downsides to it where they aren't that great, but cameras today on phones are phenomenal. They take great images. They take pretty darn good video. The only things that you're kind of limited with here are on the iPhone, the speakers and the microphone, not the speakers, the microphones aren't really good. So you need to get some type of shotgun mic or lavalier mic that you can put on yourself or whoever you're interviewing. Or just get another audio capture device, but we'll go through those in a little bit. So right now we'll talk about cameras, we'll talk about stabilization and audio in just a minute. But another thing that's kind of a downside to this is you're stuck with the frame rate, and the exposure is going to be an automatic exposure. You don't really get to choose and select how those things work, and I'll talk about with the other cameras how that can kind of play into a role with how good your footage looks. So if you're stuck, if you're really tight, I still use this. I have stabilization for it, and I'll show you that too in a minute. Another camera that I've got here is I've got my Sony A6300, which this is a mirrorless camera. Fantastic little camera for the price. The kit lens that comes with it is pretty stellar too, that you don't even have to go out right away and buy a whole bunch of lenses to get going and get really good content with this camera. I love this thing to death. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But the other one that I like is this Canon. This is a Vixia G20. And this is an HD actual video camera, so it's a little bit different than this guy. And we'll talk about just the differences between a video camera or SLR or mirrorless camera like this one is, and what are really the pros and cons of each of these. One pro to the video camera is that there is no recording length limit. So on this video camera, you can pretty much set it in a corner, set it to record, turn it on, push it, and it can record you all night long. So I really like to use these just set up in the corner of the room to capture either a long length time lapse, maybe on the dance floor that I can compress it, or even just to record myself as an MC and be able to look back and see how I'm doing, because I don't really have to watch it. Other benefits of this guy, it has built-in ND filters, which I'll talk about those in a minute too, but I'm not going to get into it right now. ND filters are basically like sunglasses for this camera, so you can set certain rates and be set up properly so that you can capture the best video possible without having to change lenses, and you don't have to really adjust a whole lot. So it's really just, it's set to go, it's good, it can record a long time, and it's simple. Now back to the A6300, the Sony over here. The things I love about this camera are one, the size of it. It's just tiny. Look at that thing. So small. I mean, compared, like, my hands are tiny, and this thing is, it's just small, and it puts out fantastic video. You don't have to have a crazy stabilizer for it. It has built-in lens stabilization in this kit lens, as well as it's got an electronic zoom here, which that's pretty cool. Pretty cool to have an electronic zoom like that. And also, what I love about it too is you can use it as a camera. So you can take high quality still pictures so that you can get good video as well as you can get still pictures. Now, another, I guess, upside to it, you can switch your lenses. So if you do want to get a super shallow depth of field, you can get like a 50 millimeter 1.8 aperture lens and get that smooth, like blurred out background. And you can get other lenses in different styles so that you can fit your video to what you want. But that's not necessary on like the video camera over here. So these are a couple that I like to use. And before I move on to stabilization and audio, I just want to give you a couple quick tips about actually using these cameras and using them appropriately. The first thing I want to talk about is what to use as far as the preset settings. I absolutely hate using auto on a video camera. Never use audio, or never use auto, always use audio. Never use the auto setting. Repeat it with me, say it right now, say it back. Sean, I promise I will not use the auto setting on my video camera. And there are a couple reasons for this. When you are taking a still picture, your shutter speed and your ISO and your aperture, those are the three things that are going to make up the exposure of your image. Those three things have to be set a certain way for video to look right. If you don't set them right, then your video can look shaky, it can look weird, and your camera doesn't know that. It doesn't go, oh, he's doing video, so I can't crank up the shutter speed, or I can't crank up the ISO. And what happens is you end up getting all of this video content that looks terrible. Now, when you're shooting, if you're newer, a couple of things I like to do, I like to use what's called TV mode on most of the cameras. What TV mode does is it allows you to set your shutter speed. And that's where you're going to have the most issues. Typically, when you're shooting video, if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, your camera shutter speed should be double that. So it should be 48, or I think the next closest setting on this camera is 50. That means your shutter speed should pretty much always be there, always at 50. So you don't have an option there. If you have a fixed aperture, if you're using like a 1.8 lens, that's stuck. You can't do anything with it. This one goes between 3.5 and 5.6, so I have a little bit of wiggle room. And what happens in TV mode is it sets your shutter speed where it's supposed to be, and then it will adjust based on your aperture and ISO. And another really cool feature in here, and if I get too technical, I'm kind of nerdy. So if I get too technical on you here and you have any questions about any of this stuff that I'm bringing up and talking about, please reach out to me and I'll try to help you out the best I can. But you can set, back to ISO, you can set a limit on here so that it won't go over a certain point. Because what happens with ISO when you get too high is your footage starts getting grainy and yucky looking, and you don't want that. So if you play around with your low light settings, you can find where that little magic line is, where it starts looking terrible and where it doesn't. And once you find that, you can set your ISO limit on there, put it in TV mode, set your shutter speed, and essentially you're good to go. You don't have to worry about anything. But there are a few steps to getting to that point. And you can do that in this camera. You can also do it in the video camera here. But your cell phone, unfortunately, you can't. You're kind of stuck. So never, ever, 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 ever shoot in automatic profiles on these cameras. Yes, they're pretty good, but you'll run into trouble. It'll be an issue. Learn the manual settings. Do some of the things I just told you, and you're going to get some great footage. Another quick tip when you're shooting, choose your frame rates wisely. When you edit, Frame rates are when they talk about 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second or 60 or 120. You want to choose your frame rates intentionally. Most cinematic stuff is shot at 24 frames per second. The reason you would shoot at 60 is so that you can do slow-mo and slow it down. But you don't want to necessarily shoot everything at 60 or everything at 24. You want to shoot intentionally whether you want to create slow motion or if you want things in real time. Because what will happen is if you drop a 60 frames per second video on a 24p timeline is your software that you're using will drop frames on their own. It'll be like, oh, I'm just going to pick, and they'll toss them out, and it'll look jittery. It won't look as good. So choose those intentionally. And also, I don't really shoot at 4K. I don't, because if I'm streaming content during an event, a lot of times I'm exporting the final file at 720p just so it's not working as hard on my computer and it looks good during the event. So I like to use 1080p for my total video, just because if you use 1080p, then you can scale it down. You could scale it up to 4K to an extent, but you'll lose quality. But you don't really need that for streaming or for anything that's not going to be future-proofed. And also you can get higher frame rates and a lot more versatility with your camera. So just to recap, never shoot what? Never shoot auto, and never, ever, 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 ever use the wrong frame rates to put them in a different time. It'll just create a mess. Pick them appropriately. I recommend 24 frames per second and 60 for slow-mo. That's how I operate here. The next thing that is going to take you to the next level right off the bat is your audio quality. Audio is king when it comes to video. Audio is where it's at. And I think that's the number one thing that I see with DJ videos or gig logs and things that always bothers me. They'll have these really great sharp images, and then the audio is just junk because they're taking it off the speaker by putting just a microphone next to the speaker, or they're taking it off their camera, which another thing about cameras, they tend to have really crappy microphones. They're just not good. And so I have on-camera microphones like this shotgun mic. I think this is a Rode Video Mic Pro with a little dead cat on it that knocks down wind noise. These are nice, but they still can get pretty noisy and junky. So I also really love these Zoom recorders. I have this H4n, and I also have an H1, Zoom H1. The H1 here, I think these are like $100 ish, and this is more like the 250 range. The upside to the H4n, and I think the new model is the H4n Pro, is they have these XLR preamps in them, which is really, really nice to be able to plug directly into your board. I don't use the onboard microphones a whole lot, but you can also 4-channel mix. With these, the H1, I love these because these are really super duper easy to take a lavalier mic and hook up into the line out and use as an interview box. So we'll hook these up and then just like throw it in the jacket pocket of whoever's talking, and then I'll sync the audio later. Or you can connect either one of them directly to your board, to your DJ board, and that way what you get is good, clean, crystal clear audio. Even if you're playing back dance sets and mixes and those kind of things, if you can get your direct line from the board, it's going to sound so much better than taking it from a mic or a speaker, and it will take your gig logs and it will take just your overall content and make it that much better. I get the downside where some people will say, hey, but then I don't get the crowd noise and I don't get all that kind of stuff. Well, it's got 2 inputs on it. So just go into multi-channel mixing mode and then take another mic, throw a mic on there that's just for crowd noise, and then record your direct from the board. Then what you can do in post afterwards is you can mix how much crowd noise is in your video versus just having it stuck in there. Couple quick tips on these guys before I move on to stabilization, and we'll talk about stabilization and what's good, what's bad, what you should do, and what's going to work better. With these recorders, again, just like the cameras, the auto gain mode sucks, just like auto exposure mode sucks on cameras. If you use auto gain, 9 times out of 10, I had issues with clipping and problems. What you should do is take this thing. I don't know if you can see this real well or not, but it has the levels on here. So you can set your record level on the side. And then what you want to do is just crank it up until you get to the point that, like, right now it's hitting like -12. I want my peaks to hit at like -6, between that -12 and -6 right there. And when they're hitting in between there, that gives me enough room that I'm not getting to zero where it's going to peak out and I'm going to have a lot of issues. If you're getting too low, if you're getting down below that -24 to -48 most of the time, you're going to get a lot of noise in your sound. But just try to hit that between that -6, -12 for your peaks as you're consistently talking, and you're going to get really, really great clean audio. And like I said, if you really want that room noise and you want to do the extra work, throw an extra mic on it, capture that on another channel, and then mix it, because otherwise it's bled in there. It's going to sound weird. The music doesn't sound as good. Just do it. Get one of these, record your mixes. You're going to love me for it, guaranteed. I just know it. I'll use these, the H1s, for interviews, like I said, with the lavalier. And what that does is it gives you a really nice close proximity microphone that you can really hear and understand it. In pretty much any software that you get, I use Final Cut Pro 10. You can sync audio with your clips incredibly easily. It will take the audio from the sample clip and it will take the audio from your audio file here, and it will just sync them together and they'll sound super duper good. Okay, one more thing that I'm going to talk about here is stabilization. So let's go back to our iPhone. We'll go back to our iPhone for a minute and talk about stabilizing that. I'm sure you've all seen the lovely videos that just are like shaky and jittery. It's like the camera is bouncing around like this and it looks horrible, right? So I would hook yourself up. This is a stabilizer. It's made by Zhiyun Crane. It's the Zhiyun, I don't remember what model it is, but it's made by Zhiyun, and it's their iPhone stabilizer. What's cool about it is it's got this little joystick, so you can move and tip it up and down, and I think you can even pan left and right depending on the mode that you're in here. Yeah, there we go. But what's cool about this is when you're walking around, it's going to move with you. And it's going to keep everything nice and smooth, and you'll just get this real professional look. So even when you're shooting with your iPhone, or if you're an Android guy, I'm sorry, I guess that's up to you. But you can get this nice, stable, awesome looking footage by using a stabilizer. This little guy was not real expensive, and it's super duper handy to be able to have to just walk around and grab some footage while I'm at an event. I have its big brother too. I kind of showed this earlier, but this is the Zhiyun Crane for my A6300 that I have. And what's cool about this guy is it's kind of the same thing. You can get that, it's easy to balance. You can get some nice sweeping motions, as well as it just keeps your camera completely smooth. Some tips and tricks, I guess, for this thing when you're working with it, and what I've seen DJs really do wrong, or just video editors and video capturers in general, is they think, okay, cool, my footage is stable, it's level, that's great, now I can just run around with the camera like a crazy person. And so you get a lot of this footage that's like dipping, it's all over the place, and it's jumping around and up and down. When you're working with stabilizers, slow your movements and make them deliberate. I'll say that again, slow down your movements and make them very deliberate. So motion needs to be thought about. It can't just be, hey, okay, it's stable, so I'm going to run and do whatever I want. You still need to pay attention to the rule of thirds. You need to pay attention to making sure that you're not over moving too fast so that your frame rate can't keep up. You want to make sure your content looks good, and a lot of times what I see happening is people are just moving and they're shaking way too much, and it causes a whole bunch of problems. So get a stabilizer, start working with it, make your movements slow and intentional, and honestly, when you first start, make your movements very minimal, because if they aren't minimal, then you can screw up your footage. You can always put movement in when you're in your editing software, you can make cameras zoom in, you can make them twist and rotate, and you can do a lot of different stuff in post, but you can't take it out. Once it's there, and you're stuck with it. So keep it simple, don't shake it around, and please, please do not run around with your camera in your hand like this shooting. It gets shaky and jittery and yuck, and then it looks horrible no matter how steady you think your hand is. And I'm sorry, DJs, I'm sorry, but the video footage of the dance floor where you're bouncing the camera around and it looks like the whole camera's drunk, it's not super good. Get it nice and stabilized. Get a tripod even. Just leave it. Set it still. You can put movement in later, but you can't take it out once you have it, and once the moment's gone, it's done. It's done. So to recap here, I'm going to go back and just kind of show you. So I've got this A6300 DSLR. Love this camera on my Zhiyun Stabler. Fantastic. Downside of it, I guess I didn't talk about, the only downside is there is a recording limit. I think the recording limit is like 20 minutes, and it'll shut off and you have to restart it again. So it's not a good camera if you're going to set it in the corner to just try to capture things. This is more of your run and gun camera, where that's where this guy comes into play, and I really like using him because this one you can just set in the corner, turn it on, hit record, and it'll run all night. It even has a dual slot for your SD cards. So you can have two of them recording. You can have it overlap to the next card, or you can actually record on dual slots if you want to at the same time, just for a backup, which is really cool. So that's cool. Use your phone. If you want to use your phone, you can do that too. That's awesome. Stabilization is king, and audio is more important than video. If you have terrible audio, nobody will want to watch your video. That's just truth. If they can't understand what people are saying and they can't understand what's going on, it's going to make for a terrible film. So work on your audio. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, about cameras, about getting into this, getting started, hit me up. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me by going to my page, Sean Carlson Studios, which is my personal brand page. Hit me up, send me a message, shoot me an email, sean@carlsonentertainment.com. Call me, whatever works best for you. But make sure you reach out if you want to get better. Keep working. If you have any questions, I'm here for you. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this was helpful, and I hope I gave you some tips and tricks and ideas that are going to help take your films to the next level. Good night.